Hala Khouri is here. Hala, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Where were you born?
I was born in Beirut, Lebanon.
Do you have memories of it?
You know, I don't know if they're real memories or memories of stories that I was told, because I have these flashes of memories. We left when I was 3, and the war started about a year and a half before we left. And so I have these stories being told of like looking out the window as the trucks would take my dad, who was a doctor, up to the hospital, the big tanker trucks, and we would just watch it, make sure that like it didn't get bombed on the way up. And you know, when there were bombings, my mom used to tell us that it was someone's birthday and that those were fireworks. But we knew that wasn't true. And my sister and I would wake up and say, I hope it's no one's birthday today. So I have like these like flashes of memories, but I don't know if they're stories that I'm remembering because they were told to me.
Right.
Because I was so young when we left.
So little. Yeah.
Yeah.
So whether they're told to you or you experience them, do they represent a little bit of trauma?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I think that core trauma of having to leave a country because of war has shaped my entire life and my whole purpose.
Wow. So you left when you were 3. It started to shape your purpose. Was that when you relocated to Miami?
So we went from Beirut to Middlesboro, Kentucky.
Oh, okay.
Where we lived for a year, where I learned to speak English, clearly, you could tell from my accent. We lived there, and then after about a year, we moved to Miami. And my dad got a job there, and his brother was living there, and we had family there. But, you know, my mom didn't speak any English when we came here, and I spoke Arabic and French, and my little sister, I don't even think she spoke yet. So it was a big change. But we were told the houses were made out of chocolate here, so we were very excited to come.
Your mom is good. Birthday parties and chocolate.
So every Easter we'd get these chocolate houses, just eat the whole thing.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Well, so when you, okay, I'm just trying to picture this. You're Lebanon, Kentucky, Miami, all within, you were 4 and a half by the time you landed in Miami.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of culture.
Yeah.
Were you finding that you had a perception of the world that was a little different because of that?
Yeah, you know, it's all kind of fuzzy. I remember being in like preschool in Kentucky, and I didn't speak English, my mom didn't speak English, and I'd be in these classrooms with all these blonde people, you know, like we didn't have blonde people in America, in Lebanon. Everybody looked different, and my mom was also really nervous to be in this new country. So, I mean, the thing is that my mom is so amazing. She protected us so much that I always felt secure. Like I don't have any memories of feeling scared or insecure about the world. Because she was always there. But I do remember feeling really new. Yet I feel like we had a lot of love around us. Like when we were in Kentucky, we had these sweet neighbors, Aunt Evelyn and Uncle Jack. And they used to come over and hang out with us, and they had bunny rabbits. And, you know, I feel like we had community wherever we went. And so there was a lot of support. You know, I always say that even though I came from war, which is a lot of trauma, I'm not traumatized by it because I was protected. And when we're protected, we don't necessarily get traumatized by traumatic events. It's when we have trauma and we don't have the protection that we then have to deal with it later on.
That's really interesting. I've heard that in relation to addiction too, that there's when you have a immediate like support system and an immediate like environment that you accept, that addiction's a lot less intense to manage.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so Miami, big Cuban influence there.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Yeah. Well, all my close friends, my best friend was Cuban, and my other one was from Venezuela. So I grew up mostly around those cultures. You know, some of my friends had really big fancy houses, and we didn't know what their parents did for a living. So for sure, there was like, so like, oh, they have a plane. What does your dad do again? But I went to Catholic school. I went to like all girls Catholic school till like 7th grade. So again, really protected with a lot of the like upper class Cubans who came from Cuba. And again, it was a very high, you know, only the kind of wealthier white Cubans came to Miami. So it was also a really specific socioeconomic group that I was exposed to.
Did you find that the culture that you were coming from, even though you were only 3, but your family, your mom not speaking the language, did you find that the connection to the Cuban culture was a nice?
Yes. Yeah, I was never friends with American people. Okay. The American side.
Yeah.
And only looking back now, it wasn't conscious.
Yeah.
Like now I look back and I'm like, okay, my friends was the Venezuelan girl, the Cuban girl, the gay girl, and the black girl, you know? So those of us that were a little bit more on the margins understood each other, and I was never part of the popular group. And culturally, we were really different, but we were much closer to the Cubans in terms of the tribal mentality and speaking another language. Yeah. So it was kind of neat to go to Miami and I did feel weird because of my culture in some ways, but so many people were coming from different cultures that I was around. Right. And that I felt I could find that connection with them.
But as I started to read about you and understand your path, it really feels infused, lined with education and intelligence. And I feel like also the cultural diversity really added to you expanding your mind and being in that place of intelligence. Am I getting the right
I mean,
impression?
education was really stressed. Like, I didn't know you could not go to college. I thought everybody had to go to college. So, education was something that was really important and really supported. Yeah. So I feel really privileged in that way to have had my education, my college was paid for, and the support to get a really good education.
Because both your mother and father were very successful.
Yeah, my father was a physician, was a doctor, and my mom studied interior design and then ended up running my dad's place, my dad's office. And I've always, it's funny, I'm going back to school this fall. Because there's more that I want to learn. I've always loved school. I'm kind of a nerd that way. I love school. I do well at it. It doesn't really stress me out. So, I think that from a very young age, I was especially interested in understanding how the mind works. And so I was that kid, like in the 8th grade at the New Age bookstore, reading like The Road Less Traveled and reading self-help books. Mostly because I was just trying to save my mom. I wanted my mom to be happy, and she wasn't. And she would share all that with me. And so then I'd go to the bookstore and read about nutrition and self-help and go back and be like, well, the books say you should do this. So, I think that, our interests, our impulse towards our passion often comes from our wounds, right? And so I wanted to understand the psychology of my father, who was an addict, and my mother, who was a codependent. And so I've dedicated my life to the pursuit of understanding the mind and the body. It's not that complicated. I'm just like a little girl trying to figure out how to get mommy and daddy to be happy. Yeah. So,
and you're not going to cry during that part?
No, because I have an intellectual defense. Yeah. I just intellectualize it all. I find meaning and I bypass all my feelings.
That's why we love you. Your sister, I was lucky enough to talk to. Do we say Laura?
Laura, yeah.
She has similar ways of speaking. She definitely was very complimentary. She talked about your relationship and how you've been close and then both been very independent at the same time. Yeah. She said that when she came to terms with her sexuality, she felt struggle in coming out and telling her family that she was gay. And she went to you. And she gave me full access to asking you about what that was like for you, for her to come to you.
I remember being on a long drive with her, and I could tell she wanted to tell me something that was difficult for her. And, it didn't faze me at all. I was just so happy that she was in love. I was just so happy that she'd found a partner and that she felt like she could tell me. For me, it didn't matter to me if she loves men or women or somebody who's non-gender, non-conforming, So Yeah, I mean, I think by the time she told me we'd really gotten close again, I think that in college we just were leading really different lives. We sort of switched roles. When we were younger, I was the good one, like I got straight A's and I was the good girl, and she like smoked pot and like was like all more the rebel. And then I like became the hippie yoga teacher, and now she has like a corporate job, you know. So we're kind of like, so we you know, we've always been different yet the same. Yeah, her coming out to me didn't feel like that big of a deal, you know. And maybe it's just the circles I run in. Like, to me, that's not a big deal. But I also have the privilege of not having to deal with the oppression of being a gay person. But in terms of accepting her as my family, like, that was not even an issue.
It makes me wonder how you handled that as far as trying to help her explain to your family who may not have been that understanding.
Yeah.
Do you remember?
You know, my mom just didn't even know what it was. Like, she didn't even know enough about women to be gay to even judge it. She was like, I don't understand, Hala. Like, they're just roommates. I was like, well, Mom, they do things roommates don't do. And she, like, really didn't even know what it meant.
Wow.
So I had to teach her, she, you know, that she was like, but your sister, she says she's heterosexual. I said, no, she's homosexual, Mom. So I taught her the words, and I was like, some people like to be called a lesbian, some people like to be called a dyke, and I taught her all the words, and I think she was just really genuinely confused. It wasn't something that she had ever been exposed to, or even been exposed to judge, right? So my mom was just confused. I don't really know what this means.
Yeah.
My dad was just in denial. My dad was like, oh, that's her roommate, Lisa, and he really got along with her girlfriend, who's now her wife. But my dad was really good at being in denial about all of it. But I think, you know, it feels like such a long time ago. But I think that my family, you know, my parents have like handled a lot. Like, you know, none of us have conformed to anything. Like, you know, my mom would have loved for me to like probably marry a nice Lebanese Christian man. I'm married to a black Jew. My sister's married to a Muslim guy, and my other sister's with a woman, so they didn't get anything that they wanted.
That's awesome.
But my mom loves all of our partners. My dad's not here anymore, but they, you know, I give them credit for being, you know, old school Lebanese folks who were able to cut through the biases that they were probably conditioned to have to see. Like when I went to go introduce my parents to my husband, who's like 6'5", dreadlocks, tattoos, my dad literally started weeping. Like when he saw the picture, I was like, so Dad, I'm in love. And I sent him a picture, my dad just started weeping. He's like, I don't understand. You know?
Oh my God.
But the minute he met my husband, and you've spoken to my husband,
Yeah.
his heart melted. You know, it's
Incredible.
like you can't not love the guy. So I think there was something really healing for them in being exposed to people with different identities. Because I think, you know, they moved to Miami and just hung out with other Lebanese people, you know, so they, you know, ignorance is what breeds so much bias and prejudice. So I think they broke through a bunch of that.
So your father has passed on?
Yes.
When did that happen?
3 years ago. About 3 years ago.
Were your mom and dad still married?
No.
Okay, I wasn't
She
sure.
divorced him a couple years before he died.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So before he died, he had time on his own, and your mom was able to heal from that marriage and move on. Do you feel
It'll
that?
take her the rest of her life to heal from that marriage. That was a long marriage.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
it was intense. Yeah.
What was that like for you as an adult to have your parents divorce?
I was like, thank God. I wished she'd done it sooner. I mean, my mom wasn't happy my whole life. I mean, she hated my dad.
Yeah.
And to be living in a home with two people who really hate each other was very stressful.
Yeah.
And I had to do a lot of managing him with his addiction and his moods. This is why I'm such a great therapist, because I can, like, I had to walk in that door and be like, is Dad drunk? Is he sober? Is he happy? Is he sad? And I was so attuned to him, and then I would just become who he needed me to be, so I would get the love. And it was a lot of work for a kid.
Yeah.
And my mom was really unhappy, and she never spoke up. So I spent most of my childhood not speaking my truth. Just eating a lot of chocolate, basically. That's what happens when you bypass your feelings.
Yeah.
So it was really tough. You know, I wish that they would have separated sooner, but in Lebanese culture, my mom was the first woman in her whole family to get a divorce, and everyone was telling her to go back to him.
Oh my
You know,
God.
even though he
No
was
support.
pretty terrible to her, yeah. So, and she actually, I'm kind of proud of this. She did a yoga retreat of mine, and then like went home and divorced my dad.
Yeah.
Because she was in this experience. We did a sweat lodge. There were all these other women there, and she was like, this is possible? Like, it's possible to be happy and to express yourself? And that wasn't even like part of her world. So she left that retreat and went and spoke her truth. And I mean, I'm so thrilled that she did it. So thrilled.
That's huge.
Yeah, and I feel like now she has a chance to live a life where she's not hypervigilant to like this other person she's living with who's so unpredictable.
Well, and it can, I mean, your focus in yoga, and we'll just go right into that, it has been trauma.
Yeah.
And so can you tell me about the connection there?
Yeah. So I was teaching yoga for a really long time for about 10 years, and then I got a counseling degree in psychology, and then right when I was done with that, did a training in a technique called somatic experiencing. And the somatic experiencing is a trauma therapy that talks about how trauma lives in the body. And SE, somatic experiencing, was like, it gave me the language to explain everything for me. And so suddenly everything made sense. The impact of our childhood on who we are, why yoga works. What was your question? So, you know, when I look back at my journey, you know, whether it's through like being a perfectionist and a straight A student and the education, which is great, but also was a way for me to get validation, and then sugar addiction and body image issues. I look back and I realize that my whole path was me on a quest to figure out how to self-regulate, how to feel good inside my own skin. And that's what we're all trying to do. We're all trying to figure out how to just be okay in our own skin and not be freaking out, basically. So whether I was on a diet or binging on food or in a codependent relationship, everything is us trying to sort out how to be able to be present and how to be able to be okay. So when I finally got that, it shifted how I approach everything I do, right? So I could say, well, I'm gonna do yoga because I wanna have like this line in my arm, or like, I wanna be able to like do this weird thing with my body. But why, you know? What's our goal? And I got really realistic that my goal is just to be happy and to be in healthy relationships and to not care if like this happens, you know? That all of that stuff was me avoiding what was really uncomfortable. And that the deep work is dealing with, like, am I good enough? Do I deserve love? Like, when we ask ourselves those more difficult questions, we don't distract ourselves with the bullshit of like the food and the clothes and does my hair look okay and all that other stuff.
The people around you, do you feel that you were able to bring them, they came into your life because of the work you were doing, as far as like you were healing, you were finding your voice, you were doing all that? Did that bring people that were meant to be in your life in?
Oh yeah. I mean, before I did this work, the only people that I had as friends were people who needed me desperately. And I was like their therapist. And I had a stomachache all the time because I could never meet everybody's needs. And because I realized that I thought that I would only get love if someone needed me, right? And if they didn't need me, then they would leave me. So then I needed to find really wounded people to be my friends. And they loved me because I wanted to help them. So when I realized that, I was like, all right, things have to change. I'm gonna make this my job, and if you pay me, I'll help you. But I need my relationships to be with peers, with people that I can break down in front of them, and then they can break down in front of me, that it's actually reciprocal. So my friendships all evolved and changed, and all my relationships evolved and changed. And now, I mean, the people that I'm around, my close friends, are incredible. And I could be curled up in a fetal position crying with them, and then they'll do the same with me. They're not these like really needy codependent relationships. Yeah.
So when that shift happens and you are in your own skin and you're around people that are peers and you're not trying to people please everyone, how does that affect your teaching?
Oh, tremendously. I mean, when I was uncovering this part, I realized that I was teaching just to get people to like me. That when I taught, I got to be the popular girl because I was never popular. So when I was teaching, people cared about what I had to say. And you know, when I look back at my teaching 20 years ago, I was just trying to get everyone to like me, which isn't serving my students, because then it's all about me and my needs. And so my teaching really changed in that it really became about like, what do my students need? Even if they get uncomfortable, even if they get mad, I'm here to serve them, and I'm gonna go get my need to be liked met somewhere else. So it made my teaching a lot deeper and way more authentic.
Do you find, because you have that energy of healing and dealing with trauma in your work, that you have to be very clear about the line that you're talking about, the line between your students and you?
In terms of boundaries with my students,
Yeah.
I have really strong boundaries, so I don't think I've ever really confused a student.
How do you do that? As a lot of people here are teachers.
Yeah. How do I do that? Well, a lot of it is in how I interact. So if students are coming up to me and want to share personal material, instead of asking for more information, I just mirror back, like, oh, that sounds like that was really hard. I'm so sorry, I have to go, type of thing. You know, time boundaries, you know, where I'm not available 30 minutes after class to talk to students.
Right.
And I'm genuinely not, because my life is so compacted.
Yeah.
But then that's a really neutral way to say, oh, that sounds really hard. I'm sorry, I do have to go. A lot of it feels like it's subtle. I think in the past, I would have enjoyed that a student wanted to open up to me, and I might have given them signals to tell me more, and then made it confusing. Because suddenly, like, we're there for half an hour and I do have to leave and there's no follow through. So I also know it's harmful to open up those doors outside the boundaries of a yoga class. So when the yoga class ends, you know, there's some interaction,
right,
and then it's over. Like, our relationship is over at that point. I mean, that said, I think being in community is really great. And so seeing students outside of class at community events is really healing. I think it's really all about, in that one-on-one interaction, noticing, like, if my codependence is hooked, I can feel the, like, oh, I really want to save this one. Okay, I'm just going to give her a few more minutes because she's so sweet, and the poor thing, right? When that comes up for me, I have to watch it. Right. Versus, yeah, you're on your journey. That sucks. Wow, that's really painful, but it's their journey. And I can give them therapist referrals, I can make sure they're reaching out to their friends, but it's not for me to take on.
Almost like the person coming up to you, and it sounds like they're coming up to you with almost the same insatiable hunger that an addict would have. Like, they're craving somehow you're soothing them somehow.
Yeah.
And it's
or that I'm going to have the answer. I think, you know, if you're teachers, you probably see this, like, our students can idealize us, that we must have the answers, or we can see them more than they can see us. I did that to my teachers when I was younger. I was like, just tell me what you see, you know?
Yeah.
And so I know that feeling. I don't judge it. I empathize with it. But it's about giving, like, that power is yours. This is your path.
Yeah.
But it's taken me a long time to be okay with that, to see somebody suffering and without feeling like I'm being like a total bitch. Like, yeah, sorry, that's your thing. You know, that it's actually healthy to have those boundaries.
It sounds like you figured out a way to handle it with care.
Yeah.
Where it's never going to be like that, she just dropped me.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Can you speak to me about what you're doing with the work that you're doing inner city wise, like the way that you're going in and helping juveniles and some of that work that your husband was like, she's saving the planet. I said, I'll have to ask, saving the planet.
Ask her about that.
Yeah.
Oh my God, please. We're just trying to save ourselves. You know, I haven't been doing as much direct service lately. Before I had kids, I was teaching yoga in juvenile hall, and I was working with court-involved kids and really helping them use the practice to let them self-regulate within, you know, the walls of being imprisoned or the walls of a really unjust juvenile justice system. You know, the yoga was really empowering. It was something that they could do, even though they had no control over anything else in their lives. Incarcerated kids don't have any rights. I mean, there's no doors on the bathroom stalls, you know, everything. The lights are on all the time. So it's really, really hard.
Well, and talk about a hard audience. How did you reach them?
Oh, yeah. You know, they're not that hard. I mean, you go to folks with trauma and you're like, this thing's gonna help you not freak the fuck out. Am I allowed to cuss on this show?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And they're like, bring it on, you know?
Yeah.
So, you know, they weren't that hard of an audience.
That's
I mean,
nice.
some of the groups are really hard, but, you know, if you can talk to people like they're human beings and not be like, oh, you poor things, or like be sort of creating that separation, but rather just really be connecting.
Yeah.
It was really, really powerful. So our first semester in the halls, the whole staff they were saying that the days that there was yoga, it was like a day off for them. Everybody could really manage their behavior and there weren't fights. They wanted me to come back more, but it was just me. So I decided I needed to train teachers to do this. So I've spent like the last 10 years leading trauma-informed yoga trainings to train teachers to go into environments where there's trauma and do it effectively. But then this year, now it's been like 3 years that I haven't been working directly with youth. So I realized I need to go back and actually do that again. So I started volunteering a few months ago with court-involved youth in Culver City. And so it's really humbling, you know, like I have to walk in and walk around and be like, hey, do you want to do yoga? Like, who wants to do yoga? And you know, they're usually like, nah. You know, and then they're like, do we get points for it? I'm like, yeah. So then they'll come, and I have like 2 kids kind of like really stoned on their mats, you know, and maybe doing some yoga. So it's really humbling, you know. 'Cause I'm like, do you know who I am? People pay me to do this. Like, I'm coming. My ego's like, I'm a professional leader.
Well, little do they know that they're in the same room with one of the co-founders of Off the Mat.
Mm-hmm.
To see Off the Mat change our community the way it has.
Oh.
Can you just tell me, how did that start?
Yeah, Off the Mat started in 2007, so it's been about 10 years. We were birthed actually by a couple of community organizers in San Francisco who wanted to build a huge progressive movement. And they were studying the evangelical church, which had 100 million members. And they were like, why can't we do this? Why can't progressives organize like the right can organize? And so what they learned was that this church had this small group model, getting people into small groups to do a transformative experience together, kept them connected to the church, right? So they were like, let's build small groups in progressive communities. Oh, we'll start with the yoga community. It's super progressive. And they went to the most visible yoga teachers. They went to Sean Korn, they went to Shiva Ray, and they said, we have this idea. We want to take your students who get all inspired around activism, because they were both doing activism work, and put them into small circles. And we'll build a curriculum, and then eventually we'll have all these small circles, and we'll go to other communities, and then we'll have this huge progressive movement. So Sean and Shiva both said, go to Hala. And you know, that was really cool for me, because I in 2007, I wasn't like a visible yoga teacher. I wasn't like doing yoga journal things or, you know, conferences and stuff. They both said, you know, Hala's the one doing community work. She's under the radar. She's not doing the stuff that puts her in front of the camera. And so after they interviewed the 2 of them, they're like, all right, you're the person to go to. The first 2 people we met told us to go to you. So they came to me, and I ended up writing the 7-week curriculum of transformation from the inside out, which is like your wound becomes your purpose, and getting people to go through a process together and then do a community engagement project together. And I brought Suzanne Sterling in to help me with the curriculum, and Sean. And then the 3 of us got so excited about it, we were like, well, let's go teach this together in 5-day trainings. And so we started doing our 5-day intensives. And it sort of happened inadvertently. Like, it was supposed to be one thing. You know, the nonprofit that birthed us, they call us like their renegade stepchild. You know, they came and they were like, do this. We're like, we'll do this and 10 times more. So it's really fun because they've been such a support.
Yeah, almost like it had to change if you were going to get involved, you know, because of who you are and what you teach.
Yeah.
Wow, that's cool. So how's it doing these days?
It's doing great. I mean, we've trained, you know, hundreds, thousands of people. I think there's a really great need for people who want to find more purpose in their life, and do the depth work that you need to do if you're going to really be on purpose. And we've expanded our faculty, and we have online courses, and we've really been diving into social justice and a conversation around social justice and inequality and how to address that. Because I think that's something that I think now people are talking about it a lot more, but for a long time, especially in the yoga world, there was this whole like, namaste, we're all one, and all that stuff is negative thinking, you know, and really wanting to like bypass the shadow of oppression and inequality, and we take people right there.
In it.
Yeah.
And you have some work with animal behavior and how they handle trauma. That's part of your teaching, right? I remember this.
Yeah, the possum shaking.
Yes. So can you just explain that to everybody in the room, because they probably haven't. Is there any chance we can?
Yeah. So Peter Levine, who is my teacher who developed somatic experiencing, is a medical biophysicist. And what he learned was that animals that are in the wild, that are constantly threatened by predators, don't show signs of trauma. Yet human beings were traumatized all over the place. We're anxious, we're depressed, we're neurotic, we're hypervigilant, we're addicted. And so he started studying what is it that animals do in traumatic events that leaves them unscathed. And what he discovered is that animals have a way of discharging the trauma. And so the video that one of the videos we see in our training is of a possum that's being chased by a fox. And it's too small to fight back and it's too small to run away, so it freezes, right? So there's the fight, flight response, and then there's the freeze response. And so the possum just freezes and it looks like it's dead, and the fox kind of sniffs around and then leaves. And once the fox is gone, the possum starts to shake, and it shakes and shakes and shakes, and then it takes a deep breath, and it gets up and it like walks away, like no problem. You know? It's not like hypervigilant to foxes. It doesn't go to the bar and get drunk. You know, it doesn't go home and beat up its wife. You know?
It doesn't go to its yoga teacher and say, help me. Save me. Yeah.
And when you slow the video down, the possum is running. It's completing the flight impulse. So that it's actually, in its own nervous system, the possum's all like, I'm not scared of foxes. I run away from foxes. You know, it's completed the event. And so what happens in humans, because of our conditioning and because of our huge neocortex, we often don't let ourselves do that. So something bad happens or something bad almost happens and we freeze up, and then it goes away, and then we're like, oh my God, I'm fine. I'm totally fine. No, I'm fine. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm fine, right? Like, we don't really understand that it's okay to cry. It's okay to tremble. It's okay to shake. And if we don't discharge that energy, then what happens is that event still lives in our body. And so something might happen that resembles the original event, and then we go into fight or flight. And so what happens is the body is still holding this impulse to fight or to run away. And if we don't discharge it, then our whole life starts to kind of represent the past. And that's what trauma does. Trauma keeps us trapped in the past, so we can't actually be present. And so this is why yoga is an amazing way to use these tools, is to go into the areas of the body that carry those unexpressed impulses and discharge them. So that's what I love to do.
That is some poetry right there. I just love every word of that. I wanted to be able to open up this discussion to the people in the room so that they could ask you some questions too. Yeah. I know they have questions, so is that okay?
Sure.
Hi there, my name's Ryan. I don't hold a microphone very often, but I'm a recent graduate of yoga teacher training right here at the Loft. And my question is inspired by your mention of your work in juvenile justice facilities. Do you feel that there is a sort of developing movement in yoga right now to expand access to yoga practice in lower income communities? What are sort of the challenges out there with it, and what, from what you've seen, is being done to address it?
Thank you, Ryan. I do. I think there's a big movement to bring yoga to communities of color and lower income communities. I think one of the challenges, some of the barriers towards bringing yoga to different types of groups of people, is this perception. You ask someone who's not been exposed to yoga, who's yoga for? They'll usually tell you skinny white ladies, right? Because that's what we see in the yoga press. So that becomes a barrier. Kids of color don't think yoga is for them. Fat people don't think yoga is for them. Old people don't think yoga is for them. So one of the barriers is the imagery that we show in the yoga press. And I think the other concern is trying to find a way to teach folks from those communities to be teaching yoga. So it's not us coming into other communities that are not ours and saying, hey, you need to learn this thing. So I'm a big proponent of scholarshiping in people that are interested in becoming yoga teachers, mentoring them so they can go back into their communities to teach. Not that there isn't a place to go into a community that isn't yours to teach, but I think it's really important to find the voices within the community. I think there's a huge movement. There's yoga in prisons, there's yoga for homeless folks, there's so many places where yoga is happening that is not a yoga studio, and I think that's really hopeful.